Yes, I think we can start. I would like to introduce our special guest, Professor Carlos Marmolejo Duarte, who is full professor at Barcelona School of Architecture. He's also researcher at the Center of Land Use Policy and Evaluation in the Politechniki of Catalonia. He's also editor of scientific journal called Architecture, City and Environment. His research interests include a lot of topics. To mention a few, we can say about housing policy, urban design, urban studies, land economics and land management, and sustainability as well. And I think especially this topic is, we can say, reference to issues of social inclusivity as well. In this regard, he was a principal investigator of in 6 research projects and participated as a researcher in 16 others of national, international and European level. He has published 20 books and monographs and also presented around 123 papers at congresses, international congresses. So we are glad we have him here with the topic which is called traffic pacification in Barcelona. It's a very hot topic, I think very interesting for all of us. And I hope especially for you, because these issues we are now struggling dealing with them. So I think Professor will help you with the management of your project. So Professor, floor is yours.
Thank you very much for the introduction, Damian, and thank you very much for all of you and the Faculty of Architecture of this Technical University of Krakow. Professor Jurkowicz, thank you for inviting me to provide this lecture. Well, today I want to introduce one topic that, as Damian has told us, is really relevant in current cities, which is the pacification of traffic. I mean, to put the emphasis not in cars, as we did 100 years ago almost, but in people. At the first glance, Barcelona seems to be a quiet but large city where, in general, public space is pretty well designed from the beginning, as we are going to learn after. As we approach to a different scale, perhaps more human, this hypothesis, this perception is confirmed, especially in the very old areas where progressively, since the last 50 years, the transformation of the streets has given pass to a more pedestrian, more friendly, more human scale areas or spaces. However, this is only part of the reality. This is only one area which is actually enjoying this kind of features, since Barcelona is actually a large metropolitan area, and the city of Barcelona, the municipality of Barcelona, is a really small part of that. I mean, only 100 square kilometers, considering that all the metropolitan region is more or less 3,000 square kilometers. In Barcelona, we have 1.5 million people living there, and in the metropolitan region, almost 6. The problem is not the scale, but the fact that progressively Barcelona has lost importance in terms of population concentration, and all the periphery has grown, especially the subcenters, but also the urban sprawl. Here you have how people have moved in the last years, basically leaving Barcelona and going to live in the outskirts where cheap housing, affordable housing is located, but not necessarily in the best conditions, as we are going to see. Here you have another figure showing this decentralization process. This is the loss of percentage of population of the city of Barcelona that was only interrupted during the crisis. And here we have the COVID. And again, with the COVID, this decentralization occurred. And all peripheries, I mean subcenters, but also the urban sprawl areas, have gain this share of population. I mean, this is an exchange of population from the center to the peripheral areas. And here is how the people going to live in such peripheral areas are coming to work to Barcelona. In total, almost or more or less 16 million people moves along the day. That means that at least people living in the metropolitan region moves 3 times per day. If we have 5 million people living there, at least they move 3 times. Basically, half of the mobility is produced walking, namely in the city center and the subcenters, but the other part is moving using the public transportation and the traffic systems. Here you have the shares, but the important thing is that the modes of transportation are completely different, considering the urban fabric, which is dense, diverse, and mixed, and considering the periphery that is on the opposite situation. I mean, this is low density, is monofunctional, and basically is served by cars, as you can see here. The ratio you have there is the number of people moving in active transportation or public transportation against the private one. As you can see here, the dominance of public transportation is pretty clear. 152 people moves in public transportation regarding 100 in private, also motorbikes. But here you have that only 9 people moves using public transportation and 100 using the cars, which is the result of such kind of imbalance on the public assignment. The result is that all people living outside of the city but working in the city, despite that the share is not too large, collapse all the urban, let's go to say, structure, all the main avenues and highways enter into the city center, to the metropolitan center, which is not only the municipality of Barcelona, but also the municipalities that are in the same level of the sea, and it's kind of continuous. So, of course, traffic jam, but namely the pollution produced by cars is a large problem within Barcelona. Here you have, for example, the dioxide of nitrogen pollution, and clearly you can see, as according to the sensors, how the main avenues and how these main roads are areas very well polluted. Or, for example, the city center, which is the Eixample. Now I will try to point if the pointer is working, but it's working in a different manner. I have to look here, but I cannot see here. Well, more or less where the denser area, red area is the Eixample. I mean, the really center of the city is very well polluted, and the noise is also important. Not surprisingly, especially during winter, when the air is cold, we have these problems of contamination, and Barcelona is considered one of the cities more polluted, not only in Spain, but also in Europe. This is the other Barcelona that normally is not shown. Against this situation, the city introduced, even before it was legal, I mean legal in European terms, the area of low emissions. This is that blue area shown here in the graphic. That means that only cars that are not contaminant and are not pollutant, new cars can enter into this area. And the yellow areas are areas that, despite being central, they concentrate industrial facilities, so the exposure of people is not large. Another policy that has been introduced is providing the city with new public transportation, such as the tram system that was dismantled more or less 60 years ago, and now is being reintroduced, basically joining the city center, I mean the municipality of Barcelona, with the neighboring cities. Another policy is the introduction of lanes, bike lanes, during the last 15 years, and that has increased, of course, the network of bike lanes we have in the city, and the share of the mobility that is being used by people using bikes, but also this kind of personal mobility devices, such as scooters. Another policy consists of changing the geometry of the network of buses to produce a more orthogonal pattern that is pretty well related, as we are going to learn, with the pacification traffic. And of course, integrating the tariff system in the city in order to allow a more, let's go to say, easy and attractive mobility and changing everything to digital and with the information system. So urbanists, I mean, all those actions are actions by engineers, basically. But urbanists, land planners, city planners, and architects are also contributing to change this situation. So the today's lecture we focus precisely in how architects are also helping to transform this, let's go to say, terrible situation of a city that is congested by the people living outside of the city. I mean, people living within the city, they live in a fantasy, in a kind of Disneyland, they can walk, but people coming to work to the city necessarily use the car because the public transportation, as you have learned, is very weak. So we're going to start remembering where is Barcelona coming from, going through the different policies that urban planners are introducing, and finally pointing out the most important things. Maybe you are aware that Barcelona was one of the first cities that has been planned according to scientific criteria. I mean, basically analyzing what was happening in this old walled city in order to design what will happen in the extension of the city during the revolution, the Industrial Revolution. So Ildefons Cerdà, that was not an architect, but an engineer, a road engineer, was the author of this enlargement of Barcelona, and he analyzed the mortality by type of street, I mean basically the width of streets, to put into relation the health condition of people, and also the health condition according to the buildings. I mean, according to the size, the ventilation, the sun exposure, and the orientation of the buildings. So he came to the conclusion that the block, the new block, should be very well oriented according to the sun. As you can see, all the facades of the block is completely exposed to somehow to the sun in different times of the day, but also the height of the buildings should be allow to have a sun exposure, as you can see in these figures. So departing from the design of an ideal, let's go to say, apartment, an ideal multifamily home, he designed the block that will be ideal for the city, and also considered that part of the block should be devoted for green spaces that not necessarily were public, but private and containing some orchards and some, let's go to say, what we call now urban agriculture. So not necessarily were all of them ornamental. The resulting layout from this idea of having such kind of blocks and deserving most of the private land for greenery is the image that you have here in this reproduction. By having these, let's go to say, octagonal blocks, of course, when they match one to the other, allows also for easing the traffic of road networks, such as railroads or tramways at that time. So despite that the tramways were not present before Barcelona was enlarged, the new fabric will allow them to circulate easily, and after, of course, the cars. More or less, he figured out that in the center of these crossing points, there will be some services, for example, police stations or information stations or kiosks to provide services to people. More or less, the image that was resulting from such ideas was this. Somehow, the city developed along the second half of the 19th century and the first half or the first third of the 20th century, using this urban fabric and these Art Nouveau buildings that are pretty much well known along the faculties of architecture were built in the city, considering that Barcelona became into a wealthy area, wealthy economic area, since industrialization was happening and people from manufacturing industries were investing money in the real estate sector. The real estate sector was a new, let's go to say, business that was non-existent before in Barcelona, but was attracting capital from the revenues coming from the manufacturing area. And those revenues were used to build such kind of heritage building. However, it did last only 80 years or less, because as you know, Spain entered into a civil conflict that produced a complete stagnation not only of Barcelona, but all the country. And this industrial booming that was occurring not only in Barcelona, but also in other large Spanish cities stopped. And the economy of Europe continued to grow, especially with the Marshall Plan, and the economy of Spain stagnate. So a kind of gap emerged. During that time, during the dictatorial abyss, as I call, some of the regulations that were shaping the growth of Barcelona were relaxed. However, in the 60s, Franco realized that Spain has to come again into the global or the mondial economy at that time. So he produced a kind of stabilization plan to attract new investments, foreign investments, and it worked. So what happened is that again the cities start to grow. Here you have the growth of Barcelona. This is the city of Barcelona, and this is the distance to the city of Barcelona. And what you have here is the growth of population in time lapse that are 10 years. So you can see here this blue line, which is what happened between the 60s and the 75. That means that a lot of people from other parts of Spain, namely the south, but also the center of Spain, came to live to the city. Of course, the ensanche, the champla of Cerdà, of the so-called Cerdà, was not enough to provide housing to that people. So what happened is that under this laissez-faire from the dictatorial land management, it was allowed to grow the width of the buildings, to build in the facades of the block, the four facades, but also to construct new stories, as you can see here. And at the end of the day, the built area was grown more or less 5 times. So this paradise that Cerdà designed completely disappeared, and the result looks like this. I mean, a complete congested area with very, very poor greenery. I mean, only some large parks, and the remainder are basically streets with trees. However, not only the Champla was built up, but also the peripheral areas that here you have with these kind of patterns, where the central government built up some housing estates that, as you can see here, were in the middle of the fields, completely disconnected from the cities, from the city center, from the main roads, and even lacking of public space, facilities, and any kind of areas. So this Barcelona from the modernism became into something really different, and even shanties did appear on the outskirts of the city and even on the beaches. This changed as Franco died, as the new democratic governments, namely the municipal governments, came to take control of the situation. And Pascual Maragall, which was the city mayor of Barcelona, have the ambition to transform the city, attracting the Olympic Games to this. So at that time, Spain was joining the European Union. So it was the opportunity to join the power of the city with the money coming from the European Union and also with money coming from the central government, but because where some line the politicians aligned on the same, let's go to say, left-hand governments. And the idea is to take advantage of the Olympic Games to transform the city, to refurbish both the city center that was pretty well congested, and also to provide an opportunity to the periphery to be integrated into the city. So basically what they did, taking advantage of economical crisis that arrived at the middle of the 80s, is to buy land, land that was private, and sometimes were derelict fabrics and manufacturing sites. They were bought by the city council and transformed in different kind of parks. But the main transformation came with the Olympic project that I will explain really fast, that it consists basically in providing a ring road for Barcelona, allowing the traffic coming from outside to circulate around the city, not enter into the city on the one hand, to build another large residential areas, which is 2 Olympic villas, one of in the front of the sea and other in the mountain, to produce a huge urban renewal in the Raval, one of the most deprived areas that was populated by migrants. First, Catalan migrants from other parts of Catalonia. Second, Spaniards that came to work to Barcelona. And third, foreigners that start to arrive in the 70s, 80s to the city. So it was a very pretty well deprived area, and also was regenerated because the people, normal citizens, start to fight to improve their city. It was not original plan, but it was, according to demonstrations, produced by people. New centralities area also emerged in order to decongest the city. One of the landmarks of this transformation was the recovery of the seafront. Barcelona did not have access to the sea because all manufacturing plants were located along the coast, and basically the access to the sea was 100 meters. So what they did is to produce a waterfront, to remove the shanties, to relocate in social housing that was being built in other areas, and also to produce artificial beaches. The construction of ports along the Catalan coast have produced that the flows of water change, and this has eroded the landscape, so all the beaches here in the city are artificial, and they are protected with marine structures. So for the first time ever, the city, in 1992, when the Olympic Games finished, had access to the sea and has a new, a large public spaces that were not existing until that time. However, after this, let's go to say, success of the central city, the economy of Barcelona started to change. The manufacturing sector was going to China and to other places, on the one hand. On the other, Barcelona became into a touristic city. So what happened with this touristification is that the prices of homes started to rise, and this decentralization process of population to the outskirts started to emerge, producing the first images I have explained. In order to regain, let's go to say, quality for inhabitants of cities developers, some of policies start to emerge. The first one was to recover the interior patios of the Eixample. Those blocks that were designed by Cerdà. What you have here is the NDVI. This index that is built looking at the reflection of the vegetation using the satellite imagery. So the greener the image, the greener the area. There are more bushes or trees, and you can realize that basically the greenery is in the outskirts, in the Collserola, which is, let's go to say, a protected natural park, a small natural park. Here in the Ciutadella, here in the Montjuic area where the Olympic area, stadium, etc. is built. But the remainder of the city is lacking of this greenery, only trees located along streets. If you compare this NDVI with the sensors of temperature at night, I mean not during the day, at night, when theoretically it's already cold in summer, you can make the clear correlation between the conditions, the head island, and the vegetation. So the lack of these public, let's go to say green areas is one of the main issues in the city. So in order to counteract this departing point, the City Council decided to produce a specific land management project that it consists of producing land readjustments within the already built fabric. You have here, for example, a normal patio, a normal center of the block that is built perhaps by garages or parking slots or small shops or even workshops or let's go to say groceries and small supermarkets. And those are private land. It is private land, so it is not possible to build any park. Unless, of course, the City Council buys the land. So what happened is that these development rights that people have here, private people have here, were transferred to other parts of the city. I mean, if I have the right to build here 1 square meter, the City Council moved this right to other place in order to liberate this space and transform into public space. So here you have the departing situation, a private land, and the public one that has been liberated. Here you have another example, exactly the same. And this is really important because normally cities are poor, despite Barcelona is one of the most rich municipalities in Spain because of the tourism. So despite this fact, it is not possible to plant greenery where there is private land without using these land management tools. So the result of these interior patios that we call, of course, there are pocket greenery, pocket parks. They have diverse activities. Sometimes they provide access also to private buildings. Some of them has been transformed into facilities, so there is kind of interaction. But anyhow, it's some kind of peaceful islands within this noisy city that is dominated by cars. The superblocks idea is no new one in Barcelona because somehow since the 70s, when they start to recover the area across or along the cathedral and the city center, it started to emerge the idea to produce some islands for pedestrians. I mean, areas where basically cars cannot access, only the service cars. However, what is new in Barcelona is to produce a massive plan to expand this idea, not only to the places where historical buildings are placed, but to all the city. So this idea consists of basically to reorganizing the traffic cars. So here you have the departure point where the cars can access everywhere, any kind of cars and trucks and motorbikes, and the final one when basically the cars that can access to the, let's go to say, super block are only those of people living there or working there, or for example, the delivery or service cars. Basically, they do not block the entrance to the super block, but they reconfigure the traffic flows. And here you have the idea to transform all these super blocks. Here with these yellow dots, you have the interior parts or nodes of crossing points of the super blocks, and in blue lines are the main corridors where all the traffic is diverted in this orthogonal network. So the idea is to produce kind of reorganization, to reduce the exposure of people to noise, to the atmospheric pollutants, and also to recover this space that is used right now for cars for people. I mean, to produce a recolonization of the people. In order to do that, they produce some designs, let's go to say general designs for the nodes. Here you have the borders of the superblock, where basically the main roads are crossing by, and you can see there the lanes for buses, the lane for bikes, with these red lines in order to prevent the crashes with cars. I mean, to alert the drivers of cars that bikes are crossing by in these areas. You can see the hub for buses, no? I mean, this orthogonal pattern that I have explained before. I mean, the buses were completely reorganized, the trajectories, in order to allow to produce this kind of superblocks. And here you have the access points to the superblocks, where basically, as you can see, the cars can access. But let's go to say just them that want to provide service to the interior of the superblock, and the other streets are basically corridors, normal corridors for cars. And the most interesting are the central nodes of the superblock, where basically all this area that remains here is completely liberated to locate public space. So the traffic is forced to turn around. I mean, it is not possible to go straight. And in that way, it is prevent that the crossing traffic is using this space. I mean, the cars can access here, and they have to leave there. They access here, and they have to turn around, and they access there. And I mean, it's a completely roundabout, let's go to say, superblock. And in this way, despite that the cars are not, I insist, forbidden to enter, they have not incentives to do the drivers. In this area of Barcelona, which is the former manufacturing area, the 22 AT, the first experimental superblock was designed. So here in this graphic, you can see with clarity how the traffic is diverted and how these green paths are showing the interior services areas, and the main traffic is going on the red lines. And here you have some of the results. Using tactical urbanism, very cheap, they only spend 50,000 euro, which is nothing for the budget of the city. At the end of the day, since they were making experiments and changing furniture or producing, for example, putting the streets, they totally spend 100,000 euro. I mean, the double of the original budget. But anyhow, they look how the superblock was working. Interestingly, the people living there protest against this policy. This policy that was intended to provide more public space, to provide more peaceful, let's go to say, traffic landscape, was not 100% accepted by the people living there. One of the main reasons was these people was using the car to go to work, and instead of having direct access to the main roads, they have to make a roundabout that perhaps enlarged 2 minutes their journey, but this was well enough in order to make the people to protest against the policy. But also firms, I mean commercial firms, namely workshops that were very well present in this industrial area, protest against the city council because they understood that this traffic reorganization will reduce the exposure of their firms to the people crossing by, and the revenues will be reduced. Another example of this superblock policy happened in the very heart of the Eixample of Cerdà, the extension of Barcelona. Here around the neighborhood of Sant Antoni, that, as you can see here, has a market. During the 18th century, along Europe, there was a strong movement to provide decentralized markets to European cities. Barcelona was not the exception. So almost each neighborhood has a market. And this market, which is also a landmark, as you can see here, it has been recently refurbished, this transformation, this renewal of the market, one of the first to use the new technology of steel in the city, was taken as an opportunity also to regenerate the area around this. As you can see here, the streets are almost erased. I mean, you don't distinguish which is the area for the cars and which is the area for pedestrians, because it's a unique platform providing, let's go to say, uniform access to people and the service cars. The market refurbishment itself is quite interesting because basically they have enlarged the commercial capacity by constructing here you have a subterranean area, I mean under the ground level. This under the ground level is the boat for supermarkets. So in the main, let's go to say, building, the historical building, there are some stalls for, let's go to say, small shops, where basically the price is very high and the products are really high quality, and basically the people buy the groceries in the supermarkets downstairs. But this is a nice intervention because when they were building this supermarket, in order to be able to refurbish the heritage building, I mean to get the money to refurbish the heritage money, they have to build this supermarket. When they were building this, they discovered the Roman, or one of the Roman walls of the city that is now shown here in this image. So the idea of the superblock of San Antonio was to produce two kinds of interventions. One that is more hard, where a lot of money was invested to produce a uniform platform, and where, let's go to say, permanent urban design remains, and the other using tactical urbanism. I mean, soft interventions, basically with painting, you can see it there, and basically with light furniture that even can be moved. I mean, it's not completely fixed, it's not using concrete to produce this. This is the tactical area, original design, and this is the result of this. As you can see here, this is the center of where the original streets were crossing, and it is the boat to sit in the public space, and those areas for gathering people. Those tables allow to people to play or to smoke or drink, because this is also a low-cost drinking area. In the groceries around the students basically buy the beer, and after they go here and they pay half of the money they were paid in the bars that of course have been populated the area. Here you have another image. And in this area also the people, because we have surveyed them, we have surveyed the people living around us, is not 100% happy. Why? Because basically three facts. The first one is that this is a really attractive area, and people living in other neighborhoods come here to use the public space. So local residents are not happy, having foreigners, I mean, not foreigners, not tourists, but people living in strangers in their place. Secondly, because they understand they pollute the space and they make noise. Of course, when people is chatting in the public space, especially in Spain, that we speak loudly, the neighbors feel like somehow attacked to, let's go to say, their peace is disrupted. And thirdly, because, of course, have appeared bars that are very fancy, very nice, but at the same time are displacing the local, let's go to say, shops. The traditional shops that were living there cannot pay the rent that bars can do. So there is kind of gentrification of the business at the ground level. So for those reasons, people is not happy. But also is not happy because those benches that you see there are used by homeless at night. So this is a place where they can come and sleep, and people is also having new activities that were not present originally. And this is quite amazing because, as you can see, the original quality of the public space was that. And in theory, I mean, we as architects and urban planners will say, this is much better and happy. Local residents should be much more happier. They are happy. But the people that is really, really happy is the people is not living there. I mean, we have survey, people living in the neighborhood and people living in other neighborhoods. And those people is the people that are really satisfied with the transformation. Since the superblocks have kind of public reaction against them, the city council changed her mind. The mayor of Barcelona at that time, Ada Colau, say we are not going to build all the superblocks plan, but we are going to experiment, to produce another experiment that is the creation of green access. What is a green access? Basically, the idea is that along a secondary street in the Eixample area, we are going to transform this by introducing first, during the COVID, tactical urbanism, reducing the lanes for cars, expanding the sidewalks. In Barcelona, the sidewalks are really large, more or less 4 meters, the 4 to 5 meters. So growing such kind of sidewalks, this implementation signifies more or less to widen this area to 10 meters. So this is a reasonable well area for pedestrians. And secondly, to introduce hard urbanism, urban design, as you can see here, to produce new greenery, to plant new trees, but also to create areas of circulation of people on the one hand, and some small islands to people to sit and to gather and to meet in these parts. Also to allow businesses to go within the public space, for example, to put stalls in the case of shops, in the case of groceries, fruit shops, or in the case of bars to put tables and have kind of more permeable, more let's go to say, porous faces or interfaces between the private and the public space. So those were the projects that were shown to the citizens in order to avoid the protests before the implementation. Here you have some of the designs of landscape architects providing, as you can see, three-dimensional designs. The grass, which is not grass, of course, we don't have water. Those are some herbs from the Mediterranean region, some bushes, and finally the canopy that is really important during the summer because of the climate change and because of the head island I have shown before. So here you have the design in these 3 levels. Where is the colors with the flowers? Where are the bushes? To provide this intimacy in these areas to people to gather, and which is the protection from the sun. That is, let's go to say, the 3rd layer. The idea of this new greenery that was implemented is to provide also what they call the environmental services. I mean, not only to have this kind of beautiful landscape, very comfortable, but also to provide, of course, plants that can absorb more CO2, plants that can provide the environment for birds to reproduce and the insects to recolonize the city. Also, to allow the small water we have during the rainy season, that is really, really, really tiny, to be absorbed into the city. So here you have the idea to produce this green access along the Eixample of Cerdà. Here you have the same in the 22 area. So basically the idea is to connect the 2 rivers that we have in the borders of Barcelona. On the one hand, I mean by transversal connections, and also to connect the sea with the mountain, with this greenery that we saw at the beginning, this small natural park, which is the Collserola. And here you have one of the first green axes that was built up, and you can see that the greenery is somehow organic. I mean, the shapes are not necessarily geometric. The platform, which is at the same level, allows for every kind of people or children to move around. The idea of having these sustainable urban draining systems that basically are completely dry during all year, and when the rainy season comes, they become into pots, and the water can be absorbed slowly. And also they provide some spaces to children to play in, and of course with all these plants that are native from the Mediterranean region. Nothing to do with grass and such kind of, let's go to say, already Super 8 landscaping that was in the past. And was one of the most, let's go to say, iconic super axis is this Conseil de Seine running just in the center of the Eixample of Cerdà. Here you have different images from different sections. The departing point, or not necessarily the departing point, but the point where the public didactic urbanists arrived during the COVID, and now how it looks like, again with this idea of having a space to stay, and a space to circulate, a space to cars to access there. And here is the inaugural day. Of course, you can see there are not plants, because politicians are pretty well interested in inaugurate the public space, even that it is not finished. So it was not finished when it was inaugurated. But here you have the opening day, and with many activities happening in this area. More finished images of what is happening here during the summer, during the winter, at night as well. So, of course, again, this area that was basically very boring because only cars were going through, was not a commercial axis, has become into a vibrant, let's go to say, axis. And the effect on the housing market is that basically the rental markets has started to grow. The real estate agent says that as the axis was announced, the prices escalated 20% in the neighboring flats. So against the tenants, of course, are not happy, and perhaps the property owners, not living there, but leasing their property, are happy. So this idea to look which streets can be transformed into more pedestrian-friendly and how with different schemes is pretty well expanded in Barcelona. For example, the Meridiana Avenue was the highway connecting Barcelona formerly with France, and after with the metropolitan area. You can see a normal, let's go to say, traffic-dominated avenue, or almost a road, no? I mean, even not a street. And here you can see how it has been transformed with, of course, a different scale of what we have seen in other super axes, but with this idea to provide more greenery, to reduce the lanes for cars, and to reorganize and separate the lanes for public transportation, including the taxis, that they are considered public transportation, or the vehicles that are used by 3 people or more. So they can use these fast, let's go to say, lanes. The Via Layetana, that was opening area following the Haussmann idea to restructure the medieval city in the 19th century, is now being under renovation, again with this idea to produce a single platform to allow people to cross to one part of the historical city to the other, to produce just one lane for private cars and the remainder for public transportation. And of course, what is really important, to separate the bikes from the pedestrians and from the cars. I mean, they can, generally speaking, do not coexist. They go to different speeds. people, when is walking, is reacting, behaving in an active way. They even go to others, and it is completely unpredictable for people going in a bike or in a scooter. So it is really important to separate if we want to use the bike as a transport system, not as a leisure system, but as a transport city. Here you have a neighborhood nearby the mountain where this street P. Maragall has been again transformed. Here the circulation of people is not as important as the space to stay. I mean, to produce kind of park, not necessarily, let's go to say, a Rambla Boulevard, but a kind of island where people or markets can occur, these festivals, this ecological food that is sold during weekends, etc. And here is one of my most beloved places because when I lived in Barcelona, now I don't live there. But when I live, I was living in this neighborhood. There you can see the Montjuic area, the Olympic area. And this manufacturing plant that you can see here from the late 19th century was Can Batlló, from the same family that the house Batlló in Passeig de Gràcia. Here, the money was produced here and invested in the very center of Barcelona. So basically what they did is a land readjustment project. It was a private land in the city of the center. The city council has not money to buy this and to produce this large park. So what they did is that all the building rights of these people was transferred to these buildings. Do you see the new buildings around the area? So they were removed from this and transferred there. These premises, these historical premises, were being transformed into cultural facilities, to incubate new cooperative systems, to foster new economy based by people, small enterprises growing there. Young people wanted to provide services with very affordable prices. So all this area is being transformed there. Also the School for Audiovisual Media is placed there. And the remainder of the space, as you can see, is not green. It's not green because the people didn't want a green space. So here there was a huge, let's go to say, participatory process because it was formerly a working class neighborhood where, let's go to say, the tides, the social capital of people was really strong. So the city council, the architects, did not do what they were prescribed or taught in the school to produce, but what people wanted. And people wanted the spaces to walk. So basically, these spaces are to walk. Of course, there are some greenery. And here you can see the sustainable draining system, which are those rounds that you have in the center. Of course, there is conventional draining system. I mean, if the water arrives to a certain level, it goes to the normal drainage. As you can see here, this is not grass, don't worry. This is plastic grass. And this is pretty well accepted. I mean, people wanted to have some soft pavements where children can play, but we cannot afford to irrigate this because we don't have water, so we put plastic grass, and there is no problem. This is the only natural grass, and it has already died. Look, this has 1 year. But because, of course, Spain is not, let's go to say, Central Europe, we cannot plant grass. This is not a normal herb for us. And here you have the interior part of one of the preserved structures. The people didn't want this structure, despite it has not any value, architectural value, as you can see here, not historical value. In their memory, it was a plan where perhaps the grandfather was working. So people living around say, we want to preserve this structure as part of our memory. And finally, the last neighborhood of Barcelona, the last area that is being built, La Marina del Prat Vermell, a former manufacturing area next to the port that is down next to the Olympic area. And here, again, let's go to say, the greenery is like more hectic. I mean, there are not boulevards really clear, but it's somehow like chaotic plantation of, let's go to say, 100% natural or regional plants. So basically it's quite different from what is happening. And these herbs are basically wild herbs. I mean, they are not even shaped, no? I mean, this idea to have toparia and have this, let's go to say, 19th century gardens from England or France is completely erased in this area, and basically everything is happening as in the wild. So as you can see, we have started to transform the city in a second, let's go to say, post-Olympic era. We have made really small, let's go to say, steps, despite that the plans are to expand this network. It has have the problems. For example, the super axis of the Conseil de Cent is in the court. The judge, not only one, but 5 judges, had said this is illegal. And this is illegal because Ada Colau, the former mayor of Barcelona, that was the lady fostering this idea, built this super axis without going through the proper legal procedure that implies modifying the master plan of Barcelona. This modification will imply at least 5 years. And city mayors in Spain last 4 years. So it was not on her interest to wait to this modification. So the retailers have took to the judge, to the court, the city council, and the city council have asked experts, among us, if it was legal. Of course, it was not. So they have ordered to demolish this green axis. The current city mayor of Barcelona have said no more green axes were going to be built. So the plans are, let's go to say, on the one hand, but the reality is much more complex, and we have to take into consideration all these dimensions of urban development, not only the theory, and not only, let's go to say, the aims, but also where those aims, those ideas are landing in. The movement for pedestrification of cities, as you can see, is global. Almost all continents, a large quantity of countries have started to generalize these policies. And these policies are nice because they allow people to walk. This is really important, and they have started to research to understand, I mean, health scientists, physicians, neuroscientists have started to realize that basically most of the current diseases and the future diseases basically related with the neurodegenerative process can be stopped by making exercise. So active mobility allows to people to move is a basic thing that cities have to invest in if they want to prevent to have huge, let's go to say, loads, budgetary loads coming from the health system in the future. It is also nice to revitalize the areas, to provide a new, vibrant, let's go to say, opportunities. But they have to be accompanied with public policies to avoid the gentrification of businesses. I mean, we have not only think on public space. But they are also important because apparently they extract the social capital. I mean, the ties among people that are really important, not only for the social cohesion, I mean, to people be in peace, let's go to say, between them, but also to foster new campaigns, to foster transformations of the city, and even to promote economic development and innovation. So look, transforming, let's go to say, how is the physical environment, the built environment where people live, we can somehow contribute to their health, we can contribute, of course, to the nature, we can contribute even to economy by fostering new activities or indirect fostering by this research that is emerging, the social capital, that I will explain not in this lecture, but in the other, I mean, I have a second part of this lecture where we have research what is happening actually in those areas by asking to people what they think about this and how they behave, but also looking what the people really do during the day, the night, the weekend, the working days, and how this, let's go to say, new choreography occurs. Anyhow, despite that the trial has favored the retailers, this is really nice to have these spaces. And for example, here I'm with my students. They are not using a helmet, I realize now. Exploring this city and how it's transformed and how these transformations are according to what architects and city planners think and to which extent they are responding to the willing of people living there. So thank you very much, bardzo dziękuję. And